This warning is final for you. Never again. No, never, ever, ever.
This is Eko. During the past few months, I have been working here exclusively on AmazingTalker, and I will continue to do so. However, there are some things that I like to share with you. Most of the time, when a student approaches me, he or she will ask about my style of teaching. And now, in general, it's quite easy. It's the personalization, the customization of the classes that will suit your needs. All of my students would know that my main approach is to use some reading as a guideline. I don't like to read simple things. I detested them when I was little, when my mother forced me to listen to the radio with the magazines in my hand, because it was not my interest. I couldn't even remember anything I learned from those days, and the pace with which they conducted those lessons is so slow that it was impossible for me to begin to imitate the natural flow of English, which I think that most of the people would want to have. So, let me talk a bit about how I teach things on AmazingTalkers. All of my students would know that my main approach is by reading. Well, actually, in my case, it will almost always exclusively be novels, because reading stories are what's lacking in our culture. In our Chinese-speaking culture, especially, ever since Confucius publicly manifested his disgust against novels and fictions. None of this, stories and narratives really existed in our culture. Of course, there are these stories of the three dynasties, the stories of the ascension to godhoods, I believe that's the name, or the story of a journey to the west, or the dream of the Red Chamber. But there are only a few pieces that we can refer to. Unlike in English, even today, in the language of English is used most widely in the world, including, of course, story writing. And most of you guys would want to learn English in general. Of course, some people have a very particular aim in mind, so like taking the TOEFL test or taking the IELTS test, and some people are quite clear about their own weaknesses, especially in writing. Before we go to the details of writing and actually other parts, reading is the backbone of everything. When your English is not good enough, you listen. You try to learn English from listening. Now, some people can do that, some, especially those who work in an English-speaking environment. There are many people like that. But it's impossible to improve your English because the native speakers will always slow down or tone down their uses of vocabulary. For instance, if they think you are being too forceful, you are pushing your point, they're not going to say that, man, I think you're being arbitrary. They are just going to say that, I'm not going to agree with you. I think you need a bit more explanations or more evidence to support your saying. You see? The native speakers will tone down their vocabulary. They will extend their English sentences just so you can understand. Therefore, actually, when most of the Taiwanese students, most of the English learners are already struggling with relative pronoun clauses, the dependent clauses, which is so stupidly classified into so many different parts, like adjective clause, adverb clause, noun clause. You don't actually have to know them. You just need to be familiar with relative pronouns, because that's how people simplify their sayings, like talking to children. if you want to advance yourself, upgrade your English ability, you need, of course, learn how native speakers are talking among themselves, which actually will cause great confusions among us non-native speakers. So in order to see how they really use English, of course, watching movies and TV series is one way, but that is too slow because the dialogues, apart from the films made by the great Quentin Tarantino, the dialogues are always quite scanty, few and far between, because movie as a media is mainly based on visual effects and sounds and music, that kind of stuff. You don't need, we don't like to watch a movie that only talks and talks and talks. It would be dry and dull. However, in reading a novel, you can see at your own pace how people are using English. Actually, the first thing you will notice, apart from the huge quantity of vocabulary, is that almost every single word, the translation, the understanding of the words, differ from the English-Chinese dictionaries have been telling us, differ from that which is taught by the high school teachers. Well, I'm not trying to be too condescending toward high school teachers, although actually I am. But they don't know what they're doing, because most of the high school teachers, they will give you, of course, some high school teachers will give you novels to read, but those novels are always, shall we say, boring. So boring. So my main method is actually to introduce you guys to stories that you might like. For instance, for starters, the beginners. For beginners, I would always recommend not Harry Potter. That one is too easy. You can't actually learn anything from Harry Potter, but Twilight Saga is a good start. And if you're not interested in a romance between a teenage girl and a 90-year-old prick, then you might want to try things like 13 Reasons Why, or you might want to try some autobiography. Those kind of readings are easy because they are plain, they're simple. But in Twilight or in 13 Reasons Why, that kind of teenage novels for adolescents, the English usage will be quite close to what you will hear in daily situations, given that your interlocutors are people who are not that highly educated. However, my favorite book so far, for starter, is the Da Vinci Code, because the author Dan Brown was an English teacher, so he knows what he's doing, and because the protagonist of the book is a professor from Harvard University, so his dictions are going to be sophisticated, his sentence structures, his syntax will be formal. When you read the Da Vinci Code, you will see very clearly how adults, educated adults, would use English. But, of course, some people would argue it is not the language, it is not the daily English that you guys are used to. But I beg to differ, because it is simply that when your English is not good enough, nobody is going to talk to you like that. But when your English is good enough, you will see how English is really used, being utilized in daily situations, just like what I'm doing now. Unlike most other teachers who would slow down and whatnot, I would depend on two things. First, I trust you guys can understand my English, and second, actually, I do have subtitles, so why not? The Da Vinci Code is one of the entry points that I really love, but it can be really difficult for people to keep up with a huge vocabulary. Therefore, during the first few pages, that's why you would want to have a teacher alongside you. And just like when we first go to the gym, we would want a personal trainer there to direct our hands or direct our muscles, and giving us actually motivations to go on. Apart from the Twilight Da Vinci Code, I would also suggest that some of the people whose English is already quite advanced to try things like wielding the world. For instance, this is the book by Stephen Greenblatt, a very great Shakespearean. He's a scholar. This book is targeted at the public, the general public, but it is written in a very academic way. It has a very logical progression that would introduce Shakespeare and his greatness to the general public. Of course, when I say general public, it means I mean the English-speaking public. Perhaps it's not us, but since I am a Taiwanese, I was born here, raised here, and if I can understand that, I believe that I can help you guys to understand it as well. But of course, if you are more interested in, like me, if you're more interested in fantasy genre, then I also have a few books to recommend, apart from the Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings. And again, I don't recommend Harry Potter, that's too easy. The best book, the best fantasy novel I have ever read is actually a series called, I think the first book is called The Name of the Wind. And this is it is kind of like a coming of age story, but it is really sophisticated. You can follow the development of the main character, while there are plenty of foreshadows planted among the chapters. And also, The Witcher, of course, The Witcher. Toss a coin to your Witcher, oh Valley of Plenty. Have you seen a Netflix adaptation of The Witcher, or have you played the game? I would strongly recommend people play the game. Play games like The Witcher or Assassin's Creed, so that you can immerse yourself in a kind of a classy English-speaking environment. But anyway, The Witcher is also a good series. It has all the excitement of adventures and stuff. And also, there's this one series I really like, His Dark Materials. Again, it is a kind of a coming-of-age stories, but it is also, it involves, like the Da Vinci Code, the concepts of Christianity, which I really love to criticize, actually. Because all religions in the world have a dark past. So His Dark Materials also deals with part of the story. But anyway, when we read through these and these novels, you will be accustomed to seeing sentences, reading sentences without understanding all of the words in it. Especially in science fiction or in a fantasy genre, there are many words invented by the author, so you have to deduce. If you don't know what it means to deduce, then I would also strongly recommend people to read The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, or perhaps you are already a fan of Benedict Cumberbatch. But the original stories written by Sir Conan Doyle is pretty good, pretty neat, and the language is also sophisticated and very formal. It's also a very good entry point for people to learn English. Now, what I do is this: as an English teacher, of course, I will guide people to read through the first few chapters. Actually, there are some students who can finish the entire book with me, but that depends actually on your resilience to the hardship. But I would always say that I love to ask you guys to buy like 20 classes, 40 classes with me, but I cannot bring myself to ask you to buy 500 classes with me. So, before you guys move on to listening, speaking, and writing, what I want to share with you is the method of absorbing English spontaneously by yourself from reading, because that's how we learn English. You can go ask any native speakers how they can actually master the language. The only way is actually through reading these kind of things, novels, you know. So I can show you how to begin and how to persist. That's the most important thing, because you have to know that no matter how good I am, eventually the credit to your success are always yours and yours alone. I am just a helper, like the trainer, like the personal trainer in a gym. It is not the trainer who does the hard work. It is you who does the hard work, which will result in your eventual success. You know, the perfect body and, of course, the perfect mind. And let me just say one more thing. Apart from my teaching at Amazing Talkers, I also have a YouTube channel on which I will put videos like this, or actually I am doing a project. I call it Project Shakespeare. I'm introducing Shakespeare to you guys. I hope that my teaching there can also add to your training. But in my personal classes, I would generally not recommend Shakespeare because it takes time. It takes time, and it needs actually a quite elaborate level of imaginations and familiarity with the English language. If you really want to read Shakespeare with me in my classes, of course, I will be thrilled to comply. But in the meantime, I would try to use my spare time to introduce Shakespeare in a way of English teaching, and my first project is actually Romeo and Juliet, to help you guys get materials that is used by those, actually Taiwanese included, those who seem to be good at English right from the start. We internalize English, we read it, we use English for fun, we don't care about the tests, we don't go to cram school, we don't memorize vocabulary, we don't care about grammars. But people here in Taiwan, they do care. You guys care too much about grammar. It's ridiculous. Just read and bombard yourself with stories that will introduce the sentence structures and vocabulary directly into your mind. It's like embedding those words into your mind, imprinting the context for those words. So that when you think in Chinese, that you can conjure up, you can summon not words but entire sentences, even paragraphs in your mind, and then you can talk like this. That's about it for now. I do have a lot more to share with you. So in this video, I will conclude that reading will be a start, and this is what you can do. If you can read by yourself, then perhaps you don't need my lessons. If you can, you're very welcome to subscribe to my channels and read Shakespeare with me. But in my private lessons, you can demand whatever you want to read, whether it is the Da Vinci Code, the latest book from Dan Brown, The Origin, or Twilight Sagas, if you're interested in vampires, or if you're interested in classical vampire, how about Dracula? And if you are interested in philosophy, perhaps you might want to try Life of Pi, or Sherlock Holmes, like I said, or Gone with the Wind. If your mothers or grandmothers love this film, I would also recommend you to read that. All sorts of literature, from A Tale of Two Cities, Pride and Prejudice. There are endless materials for us to be introduced to English. And one day, you can confidently, proudly call yourself bilingual. And by that time, I will say to you, welcome to the world, because now you speak the two languages that are dominating the world. If you have any questions that you want to discuss, please feel free to leave comments down below, or just come visit my personal page on AmazingTalker. Good luck with your English.
Why don't you embrace me? Beauty is all you got.
See you in my next class of my Royal Academy of English.
Amazing days,